What's going on? Today I got my Canadian bro on the show. What's going on, dude?
Not much, man. Thanks so much for having me. This is great. Am I your first Canadian guest?
Yes. Yes, you
Yes, I'll
are.
take it.
International. There we go.
You have an international podcast now. You've leveled up.
Boom, just like that.
Love
What's
it.
going on with you, man? You were just saying how it's what is it called in Canada? Canada Free
Canada
Day?
Day.
Canada
Yeah.
Day?
Yeah, we don't have like a cool, like, I know you guys have like Independence Day and stuff like that. We just call it Canada Day.
Hey, I
We
like
don't
it.
have
It's
anything
cool.
interesting yet. No, it's been good, man. It's been a good weekend. It's good to get out with the family in the sunshine, stuff like that. The weather held. So it's been
Cool.
good. It's felt like a good weekend for kind of recharging that internal battery a little bit.
How is the weather up there? Because you're all the way out on the West Coast, right?
Yeah, it can be all over the place, man. We're right nestled against the Rocky Mountains, so
Mm.
it can swing from 29 degrees Celsius to like, you know, 4 degrees Celsius. Like it's all over the show, and
Yeah.
more so I think recently, given circumstances, right? It's all over the place. So
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's all over the place everywhere.
yeah,
It was like raining for a little bit earlier today, which I think was also like the 15th day in a row. It's been kind of drizzling or something. I don't know. It's like all over the place.
gross.
Now it's sunny and
Yeah,
beautiful out, so it's still muggy. Well, enough of the chit chat, I guess. How about you share a little bit about yourself and who you help and what is it that you do?
yeah, totally. So I think the easiest way to describe myself is what most people understand as a stress management coach. That being said, I take a very different approach, I think, than most kind of stress management coaches would take. A lot of people, we talk a lot about reducing stress in life, and I think it's a bit unattainable. I look at more how do we use it? How do we reframe our kind of understanding of stress? It's funny because you're from a fitness background and you would never say to a client, hey, I don't want you to like challenge yourself at the gym. Like that's what you should be doing. And I think
Mhm.
that we need to approach our mindset in a similar way. And stress is that. Stress is your body identifying something as a challenge. And there's an interesting correlation between a challenge response and a sort of threat response on the body. So switching that in your brain is a lot of what I focus on and helping people do that through skill sets and habits and daily structuring, ways of approaching the world and things to practice on a daily that help people kind of unlock that mindset in a sustainable way. So that's kind of what I do. And I guess who I do it for is really people who are, in my opinion, high achievers, but they don't want to step away from what they're doing. So they like, you hear this work life balance thing and they're like, no, like I need to be working 10, 12 hours a day. It's part of what I do. It's what I thrive under. So how do you then, find this healthy way of having that kind of lifestyle? So those are the people. It's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people who are passionate about what they're doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you had said something about like kind of identifying the different kind of stressors. I think I remember there's like different terms like eustress and distress
Yeah,
and
you
things
got it.
like that.
Yeah,
So
so there's what's called EU stress, which is what's
mhm,
considered good stress. I'm not remember the name of the graph right now, but essentially, if you picture a bell curve, you've got on this side, if this is stress and this is performance. So if you have low stress, you're not going to have a whole lot of performance. But as the stress increases, or sorry, this is stress and this is performance. As the stress increases, the amount of performance will increase until you hit a point. And essentially, what happens is you get to be now you're too stressed and your performance decreases.
mhm.
But the problem is most of us take any stress as a sign of limiting our kind of potential, and we try to push it down where it's like no, some stress is really beneficial to the body, to the mind, and essentially to our success and to our goals.
So what you do, are you essentially helping shift that threshold a little bit further, or are you helping them kind of recognize more so like, hey, the stress is good because it helps you with your business and it helps you with what you're looking
100%
to do?
the latter of that. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Getting people to understand, hey, like this relationship you have with your stress is actually beneficial. Like let's stop trying to push against it and let's start embracing it and figuring out how to use it
Mhm.
versus saying like, hey, meditate for an hour a day and only work 6 hours a day and take every weekend off. Like that's just not feasible for a lot of people, right?
Mhm.
So it's definitely shifting the mindset on that.
So how do you recognize the difference between the stressors? Like, how do you know exactly what's a good one and what's a bad one? I guess if they're labeled good and bad. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's tough labeling it good and bad. It's stress is an awkward word, honestly. But the easy way to look at this for most people, if there was kind of one thing to be aware of, if your stress is affecting your sleep, it needs to be
Mm.
time to start looking at it maybe under a not, it's not being beneficial anymore, right? Now, there's things you can do to help with that, right? So say you're stressed out and you're like, man, I'm not sleeping well. It's like, okay, cool. Like, are you journaling before you go to bed? Like, what does your nighttime routine look like? But that's usually an indicator, like maybe you've gone too far with your stress, right? But I think there's ways to kind of rein that in to a level where it's still optimal and it's not having negative consequence anymore.
What kind of a, I'm just thinking about that. What kind of stressor do you experience that wouldn't affect your sleep or cause something like that? Like, would you
Yeah, see,
explain, give an
it's
example, I
funny
guess?
because we give stress this massive blanket, right? Everything from
Yeah.
you get stuck in traffic to you having a traumatic experience. Like that all gets labeled as stress.
Yeah.
So for example, like I guess to be in a bit more of like an entrepreneurial kind of space, right? Let's say you have a due date coming up for a project and
Okay.
it's next week. That's, you could call that stressful. But you could, sure, maybe feel anxious, maybe feel worried that you're not going to get it done. But that's just an energy level that your body is feeling. So maybe
Hmm.
you're excited about the due date coming up and you use that instead to fuel your creativity, your problem solving, and you could probably even get that done in a faster time by sort of embracing that level, and
Mm.
being excited about handing off this amazing project to your client versus being worried that you're not going to get it done in time.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So explain to me, how did you get into this? How did you get into stress management world?
Man, it's a wild journey. I come from, strangely enough, a tourism background. I was a whitewater rafting guide for many years growing up. Did that, retired from that after about a decade, moved into the tech space, did that for a while. Still wasn't quite feeling in the right zone, but that's where I began really my own entrepreneurial journey, which led me into personal development. And I was like, cool, this personal development thing seems cool. Need a personal brand. Let's start building a personal brand. That got built on this common thread of my life of positivity that I realized I had. I was like, oh, I've always had this positive, this optimistic outlook. Where does that come from? Got curious on that. That then transitioned into me understanding, oh, the way that I approach life isn't just chance. I'm not positive by chance. I'm not positive because I've had an easy life or I have an unstressful life. I'm positive because of the way that I look at things, the habits that I've had, and then I realized I have the ability to teach others and show others that this is the thing. And that's how I essentially fell into coaching.
Mm.
Was I was like, oh, other people can get a lot of benefit from this information I have. How can I give it to them? And the easiest way to do so is in coaching.
So what kind of habits help you live more like a more positive life? Because I
I'm
feel
glad you asked
like
that
a lot of
question.
people
Yeah.
say something similar to me about I'm always a very positive person, and I'm thinking like, okay, what kind of habits might I have?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because a lot of people think that like you're a positive person and you're a negative person, right? You know, you probably
Yeah,
heard people say this all the time. I'm just a negative person. It's just the way I am. And it's like,
yeah.
well, no, like that's just not the case. So there's an interesting thing, and you may have heard of this. It's called neuroplasticity. So
Hmm.
it's the understanding that we can actually reshape the neural networks in our brain. So if you are a quote unquote negative individual, it's because your daily practices and your outlook is in a negative format. If you shift that to being positive, then you can start sort of training your brain in that way. The one thing that drives me nuts is people are like, oh, I just choose to be happy all the time. It's
Yeah,
like bullshit. You don't just choose. Like, if it was that easy, then like mental health would not be a problem, right? If
yeah,
we could just all choose to be happy. And I love to say this to people. I'm like, you can just say, oh, just like you could say, I want to be happy. You could say, I want to build a house. Cool. That doesn't mean you have a house,
yeah.
right? But it means that you set the intent to create a happy life, and
Mm,
then you can start layering these daily habits on it, right? So like a lot of them is basic things, honestly, like practicing gratitude, throughout the day, but mainly when you wake up. Weirdly enough, is what the science shows it being really good for. So starting your day with straight gratitude, and it doesn't have to be complicated, right? Get up in the morning, maybe text one person that you know and say, hey, I'm really grateful for our friendship, or hey, I'm really grateful for this thing that you did last week, if it's a work colleague or something. um, so that's a big thing. Things that you'll understand: exercise, getting outside, being active, moving your body, right? Those are all things that increase endorphin levels, give you more dopamine,
mm,
stuff like that. Eating healthy, being good to your body. And then another big thing I'm big on is journaling as well. So just being aware and auditing your day and what makes you feel better. The one thing, if people don't take anything else away from this entire podcast when they're listening right now, if you do one thing at all to make yourself feel better and more positive, is simply at the end of your day, write down 3 positive things that happened that day. And that's it. That's kind of the magic bullet, so to speak. And there's interesting studies done by a guy called Dr. Amen. He's a neuroscientist. And he had people do this for like 30 days, right? And the benefits aren't just physical, but they're mental, and these benefits will last. So after doing it for 30 days, the benefits last for months, years even after doing it, because it begins to rewire your brain, right? Change those neurological pathways to notice more positive things in your life. Because that's what you're telling your brain, right? And if at the end of the day, you're going, hey, let's recognize all the positive things that happened today. Throughout the entire day, your brain's going to start going, hey, I need to look at those positive things because I've been asked to remember them at the end of the day. And you'll start to just notice more positive things in your life.
I'm going to throw a term out there. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. It's called the reticular activating system.
I have, yeah, but I'm not bringing it all to brain, so by all means.
So I first heard of this. Do you know who Ed Milet is?
Yes.
So he talks about it a little bit, and he got it from his friend Mel Robbins, who I think has the 5-second rule, where when you don't want to do something, you just count to 5 and then just do it anyways, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I heard her first talking about it because in one of her books, I guess she might have been, I'm just kind of pulling from memory. I don't know exactly because it's been a little while since I read it. But paraphrasing, I guess, she wanted to shift herself into a more positive state. So she did some research and she started recognizing and consciously making a note every time she saw something that was heart-shaped.
Yeah.
So she started seeing more and more hearts. And it's kind of like, I guess she relates it to like when you buy a new car and all of a sudden you just see that same car every single way. It's kind of like shifting your brain to look for certain things. And then in turn, you start seeing a lot more of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of like what you're talking about is the whole...
Yeah. Exactly the same process, right? And then in your brain, for those of you who might be, maybe some neuroscience nerds, whatever like that, what you're doing is you're saying to your brain, hey, I want to make this neural connection.
Yeah.
And then your brain begins to look for those neural connections. And what happens is the more that you make that neural connection, the more efficient it becomes. So the easier it is to notice them more and more, right? As the myelin sheath increases over top of the neural connections in your brain.
Yeah. I don't know if we want to kind of dive this direction into the kind of conversation, but do you know any research or anything about, because I saw some stuff recently about psychedelics and how that can kind of help with the rewiring of the brain. And I think it's becoming more popular. Have you seen anything else about that?
I have, and I've listened to a few interesting podcasts about this kind of thing, and it's that exact thing. So what it does, the psychedelics and stuff like that, is it essentially scrambles your brain, right? And it forces those new neurological connections, right? By completely just mishmashing some stuff in your brain, right? So they use it a lot for PTSD and stuff like that. It's coming out a lot in the treatment for that. And that's because what it does is it, again, scrambles those neural connections, right? That maybe make them drop into that PTSD right away. It'll sort of interrupt that a little bit. So, yeah, I think it's fascinating research.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Well, let's dive it back over here. So what are so the habits you were talking about, so the gratitude. So I do gratitude journaling. So I guess, is that considering knocking off 2 for 1 pretty much?
I don't know if I would call it 2 for 1. The thing that I think with journaling that's I think gratitude journaling is amazing. Also, like don't stop doing that. But journaling is a great way to audit what's happening in your life. Because what a lot of us do, and you can attest to this as well in the fitness space, let's say we'll pull it into fitness. Let's say, for example, you go into fitness and you don't log what you're doing, right? You just go to the gym and maybe you have some exercises in your brain, right? And you go and you just arbitrarily pick out the weight that you're going to use. And maybe you're like, I'm going to go heavier today. So you go heavier. If you were to do that for months on end, you're really going to get anywhere, right? Because you're not tracking what you're doing and your progress. It's exactly the same with self-development. You have to track what you're doing. So you have to say, oh, I slept really well last night because I, woke up, or I got my nighttime routine figured out. I didn't look at my phone for an hour before I went to bed, and I slept a lot better. I drank enough water yesterday, so I feel better. That's what journaling does, in my opinion. It lets you audit your day so that when things begin to get rocky, you can look at that audit and go, what's changed, right? Or if you're feeling better, well, what am I doing that's making me feel better? In my opinion, that's exactly what journaling is for.
And how into it do you get? Like how much detail, how much stuff do you go into? Because I found I was doing something similar for a while where I was like basically writing the highlights of each week pretty much. I wouldn't do day
Yeah.
for day for day. I would do like a week. So then I could reflect on it and be like, oh wow, I did this, this, and that all this past month. Like I feel pretty good about that. But it was also getting to a point where I was like, this is now it's becoming too much work for me to kind of do. Do you have like a guideline for how to do your journaling or?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people to start simple, right? There's an issue that people tend to do, or really most of us anyways, like to kind of go all in on something. We're
Yeah,
like, cool, I heard Freeman talk about journaling, on Rob's podcast. I'm gonna journal a page a night. And I'm
yeah,
like, you're gonna journal a page a night for a week, and then you're not gonna journal anymore because you're like, that's way too hard.
yeah.
When I started journaling, and I've been journaling for about a year and a half, I think now, straight, nightly. I started with just three things, and they weren't even three positive things because this was before I knew about that research. So I just wrote down kind of three things that happened that day, right?
Mm-hmm.
That expanded into three positive things and three things that I learned, which then became three positive things, three things that I learned, three things that I intend to do the next day. And then what was my fourth one? Things, positive things, things I learned, things that went well, and then what I plan to do the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is, when I first started, it was like a quarter of a page. It didn't take up a lot of space. And then it became half a page, then a page. And every now and again, I'll drop it back to just writing some bullet points, right?
Mm-hmm.
People often put too much friction between what's good for them and where they are now. And that's what causes people to kind of stop doing stuff. So the answer would be, if you're not doing it consistently, you've added too much friction. Find a way to remove some friction from what you're doing, make it a little easier, build the habit of doing it, and then progress it farther into something that's better, right? Because
Yeah.
ultimately that means you're going to do it for longer.
That's kind of where I fell back to is now for my gratitude journaling, my target is three things that I'm grateful for either yesterday or just going on in life, just general now.
Yeah.
And if I want to expand on each of those, then I kind of go, if I'm have a little extra time, because I do it in the morning. If I have a little extra time, I'll kind of write out a couple paragraphs or such for each thing. And if I'm kind of like short on time and I just want to make sure that I'm doing it, I'll just make sure that I write something in the journal just to get it kind of
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
there's been days where I don't have my physical journal with me that night, right? Maybe I'm traveling or something like that. So I'll just mentally in my brain do it. I'll just go through it
mm,
mentally in my brain, right? Because it's the habit of doing it that's more important
yeah,
than what exactly you're doing. The habit itself is what you want to learn to keep.
yeah. Yeah, that's what I used to do was just in my head before I'd fall asleep. And I used when I this was a couple of years back when I first got into everything. And I was told myself, okay, three things that went well today. And I'd get to one and then I'd like go to two in my head and I'd usually pass out before the time
Yeah,
I get to
yeah.
three. So I would just be too tired and
I know a
wasn't
lot of
until
people
I
who do the same thing in the morning when they wake up. Like I've got a friend she's like, I won't get out of bed until I've listed three things I'm grateful for,
yeah,
and then
that
she'll get up in them.
nice. Yeah, I love that.
Hmm.
So has it always been all super positive stuff with you with the mindset and things like that, or has there been some bumps and challenges along the road?
Yeah, I mean, I think there always are, right? I
Hmm.
mean, I get that question asked a lot, right? Where it's like, oh, if you're an optimistic person, you must always be happy. And it's like, let's be realistic here. Like, there's no way, right? There are days where picking out the three things is a challenge, right? I'm
Hmm.
like, man, like what did go well today? And I have to get pretty specific with, maybe it was sunny that day, right? And that's one of my positive things. The weather was good, done, easy, right? That's one.
Yeah.
So there's definitely days when it's like that. I think thankfully, there's some interesting research about your genetics and how positive they make you. It's something roughly like a third of your genetics makes up about a third of your mindset. The other two
Mm.
thirds are up for you to determine how you make them, right? So I think I got a little bit lucky in the genetic lottery that I've been a fairly optimistic individual, but I certainly have had, rough moments. I know when I was a teenager, I get SADS a lot, seasonal
Hmm.
affective disorder. So I take vitamin D in the wintertime now just to counteract that. And I'll know if I don't because I start to lose energy and get a little bit depressed. So that's definitely been some of like the rocky moments for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, the vitamin D is definitely a huge savior. Because I feel like I'm not like I don't even know if you do get diagnosed with it, but it's just something that I've noticed is
Yeah.
during the winter months it's so gray. I mean, I love the cold, but just the gray and the like mood drops, and the vitamin D definitely helps.
Yeah,
And I love that you also mentioned that about the weather too, because that tends to be one of my like cop outs if I'm trying to short on time. I'm like,
yeah,
oh, the weather's been so beautiful lately, or even the opposite. Like it's been raining here a lot lately, and I'm like, thank God for this rain, because without the rain, I wouldn't appreciate the sun as much. So
100%, man. Yeah, no, I'm glad that you do it that way because that's again like a lot of people tend to they overthink it, right? They're like, oh, I gotta go like these big things I'm grateful for, and it's like, dude, were you grateful for your coffee this morning? Like done. Like it again, it's about making that connection in your brain happen. So it doesn't have to be anything wild. It can be really simple.
yeah, and I try my best to keep it creative and look for new ones. So I'm not always kind
Mm-hmm.
of like repeating certain things. But then I feel like that kind of makes it into a game too, which then kind of
I
brings it
like
to a
that.
new level. It's like, oh yeah, let me think about something good, because I always have like certain things, and I know I can always default to a friend that I haven't really kind of given recognition to in a little while. Be like, oh, who haven't I like talked to, or let me reach out to somebody. But I do try to push him, like, okay, what's something really that's like
Mm,
that I haven't shown appreciation for recently.
yeah,
Um,
expand that a little bit. I like that. That's smart.
yeah, yeah. Um, so you shared a couple of these habits and things that you do. What are some other things that you see really beneficial for some of your clients that you kind of work on?
For sure. I think what a lot of things that's beneficial to, I think both my clients and to myself, and I haven't done this recently, which is funny because it kind of leads into, I know you just asked it like, oh, having rocky moments and stuff like that. And it's like, and I could say like right now, I'm probably in slightly of a rocky moment,
Mm,
mainly because I've fallen off the wagon with a couple things that I know I should be doing.
mm,
One of which is scheduling my day. So I was in a great habit of every usually Monday I would try to do it, maybe even Sunday if I could, but I would plan out like the next few days and then do it again on Wednesday and then plan out the next few days, loosely on every hour.
mm.
And my productivity like went through the roof. I knew what I was doing. Decision fatigue disappeared, all that stuff. And then about 2 months ago now, we had our first kid, so it's kind of derailed everything, and I've been kind of working to get everything back on the new rails because it's not going to be the same rails anymore.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, no, so that's been a big learning curve. But
Mm,
definitely had to lean again on these skills, right? And I'm like, I gotta get back to scheduling my day because right now I feel almost like I'm in a sense of kind of lost and being stuck. And a lot of my clients have that problem. They're like, oh, I don't know how I can find the time to do this, and I need to do this, but I'm not doing it. Why aren't I doing it? And a lot of that just comes down to sheer scheduling. We think that we have this ability to just do what is good for us and
yeah.
that we will. And it's like you won't. Like your body will do what's easy,
Oh
strangely
yeah.
enough, because that's what it likes to do, right? So you have to kind of tell it what's good for you, and you have to schedule that in as well. Information is good. Listening to stuff like a podcast like this is great, but the action is really what matters. And you won't take action unless you've scheduled action.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's one of the big things that I know I need to do more of, and that I've definitely seen success with.
Do you just use like a Google Calendar for yourself, or do you use pen and paper kind of
I'm a pen
scheduling?
and paper kind of guy.
Mm.
So I don't know if people could probably, I don't know if this is on video. If you just listen on audio though, I just have a basic planner. It's got the hours starting from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And I just literally chuck my time into hours and write it out.
What happens if you're like me and you get up at 3:30 or 4?
You'd have to get a different schedule. This one wouldn't work for you. Find one that starts at 3 a.m. You get up at 3 a.m.
Well, this morning, as I was telling you before we started,
Dude.
I was up at 3:30 today. Part of my coaching program, I spend some time making sure that people are doing things that are a little uncomfortable. So it's exposing
Mm,
to some like ice baths, just random different things. And one of the things though is waking up earlier. So my first clients are usually around like tomorrow or Wednesday. Actually, I have a 4 a.m. client. So I haven't had a
wow,
4
that's
a.m.
cool.
client yet, but I usually wake up an hour earlier than I need to be there. So that gives me a little bit of time to kind of get rolling and such.
Yeah.
But for the most time, my first clients are at 5 a.m. So I wake
Wow.
up at 4. And when I have a new like crew for my group coaching, I have to go through it too. I can't just talk it and not walk it. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
also push myself to wake up an hour earlier so you can buy yourself that extra hour. Because so many people are stressed about not having enough time during the day, but then they'll veg on Netflix and TikTok, and then sleep into the
Yeah.
very last minute and just roll out of bed. So I'm trying to help them buy a little bit of time in the morning, and I try to lead by example. So
Yeah,
sometimes I
yeah.
do wake up at 3 a.m. on a consistent basis, but
Wow.
just to
Well
kind
done.
of
I've
help
never
me
been able to
build.
do 3 a.m. I'm usually 6 a.m. though.
Yeah,
That was before our little one was born, it was 6 a.m. and now he's getting a bit more of a sleep routine. It's back to 6 a.m. now. So,
yeah,
which is good because yeah, I when that whole, sleeping in until 8, 9 even, right? By the time you've had breakfast and get going, like your day's half over.
yeah,
And I definitely have had those days where you're like, I mean, COVID, I don't know about you, but when COVID happened, things went off the rails real quick. And pretty soon it was like, it'd be noon and I'm like, I haven't got off the couch yet. Like, what
yeah.
am I doing?
Dude, that's not even that bad. I have a buddy of mine, and he's a client as well, and we were trying to work to get a routine down track. And he had a job during COVID where he just needed to make sure that his work was done by a certain
Mm.
time, so he didn't ever had to clock in or do anything. But he got into such a bad routine where he would be waking up at like 4:35
Oh
p.m.
my
and he would
gosh.
like work, and then he would go to sleep at like 11 a.m. He would just work through the night. He was totally nocturnal. And I was like, man, this might be part of the reason why you're feeling a little depressed. You're not feeling as good as you used to be. You're feeling a little like disassociated from the world. Let's try to get back into a routine that is like productive and where we're getting things
Yeah.
done on a normal hour kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Was he trying to fit fitness in there as well in that time?
we were trying to get some in there. That's part of the thing. I was like, dude, we gotta. Your just schedule is all over the place. He would just whatever, whatever, whenever. And I was like, dude,
Yeah.
let's just pick a time, a day where you're gonna commit to going to the gym and just build the rest of your day around that. If you don't have
Yeah.
any commitments that are forcing you to stick to a schedule, pick something to be that commitment. So that's kind of
Yeah.
how we started it.
That's a really good point. I think that's what a lot of people have fallen into now with a lot of the remote work and stuff like that is they don't have a schedule they have to stick to.
Yeah,
I know like that happened to me with working out as well, where I was like, oh, I'll go in the afternoon sometime. I'll take an hour break. And I just never would. Right.
yeah,
Or super inconsistently. And then I was like, you know what? So then it became first thing when I woke up. I was like, cool, I'm going to get
yeah,
up, have my glass of water, and I'll go to the gym. And it just sets the day so much better than trying to lie to
yeah.
myself that I'm going to do it in the afternoon.
And it's the scheduling too, man. It's
Yeah,
putting it
man.
into the calendar. I mean, it's I'm not immune to it either. I was going through a period where if I didn't get it in because I didn't want to because for typically my favorite time to work out during the day would be like between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. So like right in the middle of the day, which is good for me because my in-person clients they want to work out before work, the typical work day, or after the typical work day, and then I would just work out in the middle of the day. Then I started feeling like I was kind of cheating because I'm like, all right, I'm an entrepreneur. There are other people. My clients have to go through the same kind of struggles where they got to fit it in a normal work hour, work day. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to work out on times that other people don't typically get to. So then I was focusing more on working on my business during the day, like a normal person with the work hours, and try to fit it in later in the day. That decision fatigue kicks in, right?
Yeah,
And I
man.
was like, man, I am exhausted. I'm like, I don't want to go down. And it wasn't until I don't even schedule for myself, actually. I have this application called Motion. So I just plug
Yep.
it in and then it automatically puts it into my calendar where I have the time allowed. And then I'm like, all right, and then I'm like, I don't even want to do the workout. So then I'm like, let me just go down and just get the wheels rolling a little bit. Sometimes it catches and I have a really great workout. Some days I'm just going through the motions and at least I'm getting in there and putting the work in somewhat. And then that's also helping me build that discipline because, oh, I said I was going to work out. I did it. Now I feel a little bit better and I'm building confidence in myself because confidence is just trust with yourself, right? So
Yeah.
that
No,
was
that's
helping
cool.
me a
And
lot.
it's neat because like you can take that same framework and apply it to self development of your mental game as well, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, you don't feel like writing down 3 positive things, or sometimes you don't feel like making your schedule, or you don't feel like being grateful, right? But it's just kind of do it, put the motions in, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
will start to that habit will start to develop. And
Yeah.
I love that you said you're like, you're not immune to it because I think that's a bit of a fallacy maybe that people think, right? They're like, oh, once I do Freeman's 3-step program, I'm never gonna, feel negative effects of stress again. It's like,
Yeah.
no, like that's not the way. Like, it's the same thing, right? Like, oh, once I go through Rob's program, I'm gonna always go to the gym. Like, no, like you're gonna want pizza, you're gonna want ice cream, and you're gonna want to take a week off the gym. But
Yeah.
like, it's like, are you gonna let yourself do it? Um, and I think it's a delicate balance between giving yourself enough grace, right,
Yes.
but still being consistent enough that you're making strides forward.
Yeah. I have a younger client right now who's been grinding so hard in the gym and he's afraid to take a day off, and he'll text me being like, "Oh, I had a couple pretzels. I overdid it on pretzels." And I'm like, dude, you're looking at this with the wrong mindset, man. Like, yeah, it's good that you're working out and doing all this stuff, but you gotta develop the relationship with food in the gym. You got to embrace the downtimes. You can't just all go. There has to be a little bit of slow in there to
Mm-hmm.
kind of let yourself recharge and give yourself permission to. Pretzels aren't evil food. Like, I love pretzels. I crush tons of peanut butter with my pretzels. Probably not the best thing in the world if I'm trying to look really good, but I try and I give myself the permission to, and that's what helps kind of alleviate some of that stress, I feel like, associated
100%.
with the foods.
Yeah, I'm a big proprietor of this concept of like making sure that you're making like macro gains,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means you can have micro losses. And I
Oh,
think
I
that's
love
kind
that.
of where people need to understand, right? It's like, yeah, you can have a shitty day. It's going to happen, right? But as long as you are upward trending macro positively, then you're having a positive life, right? And that's that whole thing
Mm,
where it's like, again, like you're not going to never feel stressful. You're not going to always feel happy, right? But if you're,
exactly.
you know, more often than not having a good day, and then you're more often than not having a bad day, you're trending in macro positive. And that's,
Mm,
I think people don't look at the big game enough. They just look at the small day to day, right? Or even week to week. Hell, even
yeah.
month to month, right? Like as in all of this stuff, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in fitness or anything, like you could have a bad month, but don't fixate on that bad month. There's 12 other months in the year, right?
Yeah.
Like if you had a macro good year, then you're winning. And I think maybe you adjust that slider depending on how enthusiastic you're feeling for that period of time, right? If you want to
Yeah.
really go hard, well, then you got to really be macro positive, right? But if
Yeah.
you're like, I'm not up to it, then it's just like, as long as we're not macro negative and we're not stagnant,
Yeah.
look at
I'd
those
rather
wins.
be I'd rather be a moron than more off.
Yeah, exactly.
um,
I love it.
so I heard you say the Freeman three-step process or program, right? Can you explain a little
Yeah.
bit about what your program, what your kind of coaching looks like?
Yeah. So it took me a while to develop this, but I boiled it down into 3 steps. And there's some cool psychic research about steps of three. They're the reason it's three. Anyways, it's pretty straightforward. I like to keep things simple. Again, I think
Okay.
simple means you can do it, right?
Yeah.
The first step is really the easy things that make big differences. So those small daily habits, those little adjustments, right? Those things like writing 3 daily things down, having being grateful, going outside for 10, 15 minutes. Doesn't have to be crazy, right? 5 minutes even, right? But just get outside, go for a walk, right?
Mm,
Spend time with somebody you enjoy, text somebody that you love. Simple daily habits that are going to start your momentum trending. The second stage is, in my opinion, what makes it a little bit more unique. I don't think a lot of people do this. I've been a big proponent of this throughout my life, where it's like you need to have some sort of framework. You have to have a structure in place. So we've been talking a lot about structure during the day. And I think you can have a mental structure as well. For when you're dealing with stress, you're dealing with negativity, you develop a mental structure. I love to work with my clients and build them structures off something that they already do. So if they have a hobby or something like that that has a process, it's can you adapt that process to work through a stressful or negative situation? If they don't have one, that's totally fine. There's a really easy stepping stone that I learned when I was actually a raft guide and into first aid and stuff like that. And it's just stop, STOP, right? Stop, think, observe, plan. Now,
mm,
this was obviously used in first aid situations and rescue situations, right? And I realized it can be easily adapted to mindset and any sort of negative issue. You've probably heard of like a negative spiral, right? People would be like, oh, I fall into this negative spiral. It's just like some of these things are like falling out of my control. Anxiety be the same way, right?
yeah.
So that's why like the first S is stop, right? Just step away from that thing, that moment, whatever it is, right? Step back from the situation for a second. What that allows you to do is now you can think, okay, we step back, we can think, okay, like what is going on? Like what is the actual situation I'm dealing with right now? Like let's lay that out, right? The O is observe, right? So like, okay, what kind of um so like observe what you have at your disposal to help you with. So what are your resources? What can you do? So if it's, let's say, for example, let's go back to this analogy of worried about a project coming up,
Okay.
right? So you're having this anxiety about it. It's not coming up. Okay, let's step back for a second. Let's think, what is actually going on? Okay, I have 2 weeks left to deliver on a project that I put a deadline for. Okay, cool. 2 weeks left project to the deadline for. How much of the project have I done? I've done this amount of the project. Okay, cool. What resources do I have out there that can help me finish this project? Well, maybe it's somebody you could ask for help on. Maybe there's an AI service you could use to help you curate it and stuff like that, right? Like, just start making a list of the resources that you have. The last step is P, which is plan. Okay, let's actually make an actionable plan about what I'm going to do. On Tuesday, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to make a roadmap of what I'm going to do. And then on Tuesday afternoon, I'm going to start on the website copy. And then on Wednesday morning, we're going to make the creative for it, right? I'm just pulling ideas out of my head. But that's the concept, right? You take all these things, the resources, and then you apply the resources to the problem, plan it out, write that plan down, and then do. And I think
Yeah, I love
that
that.
structure can help people through negativity, help them through stress, and through all that stuff. The third step is sort of like, it's not really a step, it's more of like the whole picture on top of itself, but it's like really taking in what you've done and revisiting it, revising it, continually exploring it, right? So like a lot of things from my clients is maybe they started really stressed all the time. And I was like, hey, let's do a little bit of breath work when you're feeling kind of anxious or whatever like that. Let's start that stop engagement, right? So it's like, cool, did a little bit of breath work. They're like, yeah, I kind of like this breath work thing. I'm like, cool, let's look into meditation then. Maybe if you're really digging the breath work, explore meditation, right? And then back to the journaling, make sure you're journaling, write down what's working, look at that, change it as needed. So that's kind of the third step, is that revision and kind of refinement process.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. So run through them again. So the first one was the
Daily
daily
habits.
habits.
Daily
Second
habits,
one
small
is
wins.
stop. Yeah, the second one
Structure.
stop.
Yeah.
And then the third one is basically revise, recap and revise, right? Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I love those.
So, and again, like it's what's interesting is, as I've developed this program, I've realized that all this like research that backs up a lot of this stuff. So I'm not going to get into a ton of that stuff, but a lot of it has these kind of bits of research pockets that kind of back it all up. But you don't need to know all those things. You need to know the 3 steps.
Yeah.
Right? And then start actioning on those 3 steps.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure my clients would hate me if I just started going into like the different studies that
the biomechanics
like, oh
and stuff,
my gosh,
right?
look at this. We got to think about this now. And they'd be like, dude, what the hell are you saying? Shut up.
Yeah.
So, so I appreciate that. And that's what is a good sign of a coach too, being able to simplify things and making it a little bit
100%.
easier for everybody else.
I think that's a great sign of a good coach, is if you can take information that you have, distill it down to the simple version, and then regurgitate it back out to your clients. Because that's sort of why you get a coach, is so you don't have to go through all those steps of figuring that crap out. Somebody has figured it out, and they've said, hey, here's your to-do list. Here's the things that I know are going to work for you. Let's go do them. Let's try them. And then let's iterate as we go. And you're kind of unlocking that database that they have instead of spending all the time to do it yourself.
Yeah, perfect. Exactly. Well, I want to be conscious of the time, and I would I would love to have you back on the show first.
Sure.
Of all.
Yeah.
Second of all, how do people find you and follow you for more information? And if they're interested in reaching out to learn more about the 3 steps that you got going on, and even hire you as a coach, where do they go?
Sure. I can be found anywhere at Freeman Beals. So I'm on Instagram at Freeman Beals. Most of my branding lives on LinkedIn. Again, Freeman Beals, there's really only one of me. On my website, which is www.freemanbeals.com. So pretty much if you put Freeman Beals and then you add something to the end of it or at the beginning of it, you're going to find me.
Nice.
And that's the best way to get in contact with me.
Cool. And as we wrap it up, man, what would be your number one piece of advice for surviving the side hustle for anybody who's an entrepreneur or side hustler out there?
I think the biggest thing is have patience. I think too many of us, myself included, have this desire. We see all these like, make $6,000 in 3 months with this online course. And it's like, the true secret to achieving yourself out of a side hustle and into kind of true entrepreneurship land and having that freedom is, and I take this from Alex Hormozy, who says it really well. He's like, it's just doing something, fairly ordinary but doing it consistently and for a long time. And that's what separates people.
Love that. Alex Hormozy, great guy.
Yeah.
Freeman Beals, even better guy.
Well, I don't know if I go that far.
thank you so much again for hopping on the podcast. And like I said, I'd love to have you back on in the future, and we got to collaborate on a few things too. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. If you guys enjoyed this, I'm going to have Rob on my podcast, From Stress to Success. So if you want to hear more stuff like this, then yeah, 100%.
All right, man. I will talk to you later. Thanks again.
Thanks, Rob. Have a good night.
Peace.